Here we've got just a few lines of code that deals with this point class that I've made up, and you'll get to see the point class in a little more detail in the activity. But for now, just know that the point class has an X and a Y, and it's got a few methods that help us to do things with those X and Y values. This code says point P equals new point, 3, 5, int y1 equals p.getY, p.setX 4. So it does a few things, and I want to stop and think about which of those parts does different things, and that will help us to think about the design of the class, the point class itself. So I want you to think about what part of the code tells Java that it's time to create an object, what part of the code changes the object's data, and what part of the code accesses the object's data. So pause for a moment, take a look over that code, and think through the answers to each of these three. Just pause. Now, the first question is often the trickiest for students. It asks what part of the code tells Java to create an object, and that's actually not the first line. The first line tells Java to create a variable in memory named p, and that it will be of type point. But the part that tells Java to create an object in reality is the part that says new point. We can always identify those types of statements in code because they start with the word new. So anything new, something in Java will tell it to create a new object. So specifically, new point 3, 5 tells Java we're creating an object in memory and putting it in that variable called p. Now, what part of the code changes the object's data? We see that down toward the end where it sets the x value for the point. So that's going to actually make a change to the values that are stored in memory, the instance variables or the fields. In this case, it would be the instance variable or field called x, we assume, if this function is written well inside of that point class. And then our final piece, what part of the code accesses the object's data? Well, when we get y from it, we are getting some of the data from it. And so p.getY gives us access to some of the data. Even if that data is private, that get function will return the data to us. These actually have names for the types of methods that they are in Java. The first one, creating an object, is called a constructor, and it will always follow a certain format to it. It will always have the same name as the class itself. So if it is the constructor for the point class, then we will write a method that has the same name as the point class that is called point. So the constructor will always have the exact same name as the class that it is a constructor for. Then the part that sets data or changes things is called a mutator. So a mutator mutates our objects and changes something about them. And so that's what we can classify the setX method as, and any other method that would change the object that we are dealing with. You may note that strings have no mutators. They are immutable. You can get new strings from a string. You can get the uppercase version, or you can get a substring, but you cannot actually change the data in the background. So classes without mutators are referred to as immutable, and you'll see an example of that in the activity that we have. And then finally, the code that accesses or gets data from it is called an accessor for us. And other people may have other terminology for these different types of methods, but for us, we'll use these three different terms. A constructor creates a new object. You'll always see it following the keyword new, and you'll always see it having the same name as the class it is a constructor for. A mutator changes the object's data. It may not always be named something like set X or that kind of thing. It may be named like move and that might move our point by a certain X and Y value or that kind of thing. But often we can tell from the names, definitely we can tell from the code. If we see one of the fields of that class being changed, one of the instance variables that belongs to the class, like the X, then it's a mutator. And likewise, if we get access to some of the data, even if it's private data or if it's public, whatever, if it gives us some of the data from that object, like get Y, giving us the Y, then it's an accessor. It allows us access. So today you're going to look at the design of classes like the point class, start to think about their fields or their instance variables, the data that they store, and you're going to start to think about the methods that allow you to access those fields, change those fields, or the special constructor method that allows you to create objects of that type. So keep these in mind as you start to work on part A of the class activity.